Rashad, the one thing that I hear on the news today a lot, and I think this is a fair concern, I think a lot of people are talking about, and we've talked about it, Rashad, Chris, maybe both you could chime in, the idea that this may placate some people. This may give the false impression that there has been change. People look at this and say, oh, look, change has come. Well, all right then. Well, I will go back to not caring because I'm going to, look what happened. We're good now.
Yeah, or hey, look at you, protester. Didn't you get what you want? So why are you still on the street?
Right, exactly. Yes. Meanwhile, not to say that we know the full facts of the case, but Michaela, I'm not sure the name. I apologize. Michaela Bryant, young 16-year-old girl, was shot and killed by police pretty much as they were reading the verdict. Whether that was, as police would say, a justified situation or not, I think you can diffuse a situation with a young girl with a knife in a way that doesn't involve shooting her 4 times till she's dead. That being said, this is not the end. This is the beginning. You'd agree?
Yeah, this is just a step forward. I mean, period. I mean, the Floyd family themselves said, they call it a, quote, victory for many, but the fight for justice is not over. And the fact that it took, a world uprising, really, after watching in real time streamed virally someone being murdered like that, and it took all of these sort of perfect storm, and there was still hope, that and trepidation that maybe he wouldn't get convicted.
Yes.
Yes. That just speaks volumes to how much further we have to go. And as you said, that recent slaying. I mean, how many slayings, just in the past 2 weeks?
Right.
It's
justice would come when this didn't happen in the first place, and we're still seeing it happen in the first place. So, overall justice, to answer the question of the day, myself or ourselves, this is what justice in the legal sense may look like, right? Right in the legal sense, sure. The family says this is justice. But in the overall sense, this is what justice looks like, right? Maybe, but isn't what justice...
I mean, this is something that I think, like, I was sort of grappling with this morning when we were prepping for the show, and I hit you guys up and I'm like, I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of justice. And I obviously understand where the family's coming from and where plenty of other people, millions across this country, who have seen police officers either not get indicted or not get convicted in a court of law. And, I actually took the time because I think that the idea of justice is a notion that is sort of ingrained in us from the beginning as Americans. And it's the institutions that sort of amplify that message that justice has to be something that's sort of provided by the government, provided by legal institutions. And there's just something about that sort of bothers me. And I looked it up, and the true definition, the first thing that comes up is justice is peace and justice is respect. And that's something that you just hit on a few moments ago, that this should have never happened. So when I think of justice, I think of George Floyd, and I think of, what Dererk Chauvin did to him. And that was not respect. And obviously that wasn't peace. And society failed George Floyd, just like it's failed so many others. And so many people who are just living. I'm not, not even the people who were felled by police, but just so many people in this country right now who don't have that essence of justice in their lives.
I want to give you 3 things, maybe 4. I didn't quite count, that we noted from our friends. Don't forget, we've had many esteemed experts on the Newsbeat podcast, and we have hip hop in our heart. So as I've always said, the artists of today are just as important as the journalists in their perspective. Real quick, Rashad, you pointed out this tweet, Alex Vitale.
Oh yeah, so Alex Vitale is a policing expert that we had on in a Newsbeat podcast episode, but also the inaugural episode of This Week in Social Justice. And he tweeted out, if you're listening to the podcast, he tweeted, Chauvin was found guilty because he had to be to preserve the current system of policing. The department turned against him to save itself. And Yeah, I largely agree with that, because it's hard for me to see the police chief and see the sergeant and all these people get up there and talk about how Chauvin wasn't, following protocol or policy, when this is something that happens in America all the time, including in Minneapolis. Obviously, you had Philando Castile gunned down during a traffic stop. So these institutions were largely protecting themselves because Derek Chauvin was an easy person to just throw out to the wolves, because what he did was so reprehensible. Even at the beginning, you had conservative media
hard to
say that he shouldn't have done this, but this is just one of those cases where it's just, obviously it was clear as day, but there was still trepidation waiting for the ruling, because there's just been so much pain and suffering and injustice that people just don't have trust in the system. And will this give them trust in the system? I don't know. I don't have trust in the system even after this ruling.
I'm gonna tell you why we should not still have trust in the system. That this was to this point right now way more of an aberration than the rule. Right? There's way more of an exception than the rule. I want to point out a couple of our friends, again, hip hop artists that have performed and been a part of the Newsbeat family. I took note of what they had to say. Rebel Diaz, who pull no punches when it comes to revolutionary thinking, reminded us, keep taking the streets, keep shutting ish down, keep protesting, keep agitating and speaking truth to power, keep reading, study the lessons from those that fought before, build with the youth and the OGs, keep organizing, organize, organize, organize. And Rebel Diaz knows a thing or two about organizing and leading movements against social injustice. So shouts to the Rebel Diaz family for their 2 cents. It does remind us that this is nothing in the grand scheme of things, that there's more work to be done. Silent Knight, who's in the room, didn't tweet this. He retweeted it. Jazzy B. Moody, a journalist, someone I know as well, says, and this is a very real way of looking at this whole thing. And I want to make sure that everyone's perspective is noted. This was a tweet. It's public. I'm sorry, but the last thing I want to do after hearing the police killed another 15-year-old black girl is rally for justice. A child was murdered and left for dead. I do not want to repost cute paintings of her or march in the street. This is not working. Jail is not justice. And that led me to the question of the day. Is this really justice? Shouts to her. My man, Nazir Abdullah, who some may know as Osiris Anthem, appeared on one of our episodes as well. I think we have a clip from him in a minute before we get to our esteemed guest. Shout out to the young sister who recorded, and everyone who marched, got hurt, got arrested, got COVID, and really rode for the culture last summer. The only necessary outcome, meaning guilty verdicts. And Osiris made the point that I made earlier, that, but not for a video, this wouldn't have come to this. We don't know that. We're not Doctor Strange. We can't see all the possible, end games. But when you look at what the Minneapolis Police Department put out, and I know this has been on the news, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but remember what they put out as their official statement was that this was a medical incident during a routine, it would seem, handcuffing. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and noted he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Caring officers, I put in the word caring officers called for an ambulance. He was transported by ambulance where he died a short time later. Those caring officers, this was the official, if you look it up, look at the investigative update on critical incident, Minneapolis Police Department, they lied 100%.
That's very similar to what came out after Breonna Taylor was killed too.
100%. So
framed as sort of like a mundane police raid.
Oh, these things happen. Gosh, heat of the moment. I'm waiting to see what happens with Columbus, Ohio. Heat of the moment. The point is that when they're releasing video, practically live streaming this now because they don't want to, but understand that this police department put out the lie. So at what point we may get into this in a minute. At what point do you actually shut it all down and start from scratch?